Military strikes against Syria could be prevented if President Assad surrenders his chemical weapons within a week. That's the suggestion from US Secretary of State John Kerry, who's been speaking in London during a diplomatic offensive to secure backing for a US-led military attack, or action at least, against the Syrian government. The Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, says the US has no evidence to back up its allegations that it used chemical weapons in an attack in Damascus last month. Speaking to CBS this morning, Mr. Assad said videos released after the supposed attack didn't prove anything.
Our soldiers in another area were attacked chemically. Our soldiers. They went to the hospital as casualties because of chemical weapons. But in the area where they said the government used chemical weapons, we only had video and we only have pictures and allegations. We're not there. Our forces, our police, our institutions don't exist. How can you talk about what happened if you don't have evidences? We're not like the American administration. We're not social media administration or government. We are the government that deal with reality. When we have evidences, we will announce.
President Assad also suggested that his allies would retaliate if the West attacked. Congress in America is due to debate whether to authorise intervention in Syria fairly soon. Nabila Ramdani joins me, a journalist and Middle East commentator. Nabila, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome. What did you know? He's very much in a state of denial there, isn't he? Because I think it is fair to say that the evidence of chemical weapons use, whether he personally authorised it or not, but use by his regime, the evidence is stacked against him.
Yes, very much so. The evidence is compelling, and the case against him is far greater than his mitigation, and that came across, very clear in that interview. In spite of his, him adamantly denying using chemical weapons, and I think perhaps it's important to stress that the timing of this interview to a big American channel is crucial. It's very important. It comes on the day as the U.S. Congress is discussing a potential military intervention in Syria. Assad is very much aware that Congress is deeply divided over the issue, and that indeed American public opinion is divided as well. In fact, 500 to 1 American is against military action in Syria.
500 to 1?
Absolutely, according to sources from Congress, insiders have just released that kind of figures, which says a lot about the lack of appetite of the American public opinion to get involved in the Middle East as well, yet again. And of course, Assad played on that considerably during the interview, saying that playing on specifically on the legacy of Iraq. Of course, Britain and the US had accused Saddam Hussein of using chemical weapons. This turned out to be not true. The data turned out to be fabricated, and yet thousands of people died because of foreign intervention in Iraq. And that argument was very much played up by Assad. He played on the skepticism not only of the US Congress, of the American public opinion, but of Western public opinion in general, quoting the fact that, for example, Britain didn't approve of a military intervention. And you remember that he gives very few interviews to foreign media outlets. And the last interview he gave was to a French newspaper, Le Figaro, which the paper ran just as France was seriously debating whether to support a US call for intervention in Syria. He came across, it has to be said, as apparently very calm, rational, speaking in English, and therefore in sharp contrast with corner dictators like Mubarak or Gaddafi, for example, engaging in mad ranting, towards the end. So,
but he's not ranting, but he is in a state of denial, isn't he? And I suppose the risk for him is that public opinion in America is useful to him because that might prevent Congress authorising an attack on his country. And so the risk for him is, well, if I put myself on telly, when the American public see me denying what happened versus the evidence they've now been presented with, will that harden some people's resolve? Will that make some members of the public actually turn against him? Not that they're for him, but might it move some of them into the, all right, you know what, let's take some action here camp? That's the risk, isn't it, in going on telly?
Yes, very much so. But I think deep down there's no question whatsoever that, Assad is not seen as an evil dictator. And I'm pretty sure that people are convinced that, he's capable of resorting to chemical weapons. And of course, over the last 2.5 years, his own soldiers and militias supportive of him have been involved in the most gruesome type of killing, including the slicing the throats of women and indeed children. I did a story on the Hula massacre last year, where even the throat of a 4-month-old baby was sliced. So, people are very much aware of the kind of brutal regime they're dealing with.
But that's important, isn't it? Because sometimes people say an argument against taking action that I have heard made is, well, we can't prove that he personally authorised this gas attack. And I'm not sure that in the end is the point. It's that his regime, it is that his regime was responsible for the attack. Not every leader, certainly in times of war, I mean, to use a dramatic example, if you think of the Second World War and you think of the atrocities carried out in the Second World War, there's no chance that Hitler personally authorised everything, but it doesn't somehow make it not as bad.
You're absolutely right, Richard, and I can tell you for a fact that over the last couple of years, Assad lost an awful lot of his commanders, and that's what desperate armies do in time of war. They just resort to the most lethal and evil weapons around. And you're quite right to highlight the parallel with Nazi Germany, when in 1945 Hitler was increasing his propaganda towards the end and increasing his use of chemical weapons while retreating or decreasing the use of conventional weapons. And that's very much what we're seeing in Syria at the moment, where Assad will be retreating in his bunker very soon and continue his propaganda war while killing as many people as possible. That's what, that's the kind of propaganda that international criminal put forward.
Thank you, Nabila. Nabila Ramdani is a journalist and Middle East commentator.